All right, so one of the most important things for you to get ready to have a good practice is understanding whether or not you're going to be using a metronome. Now, sometimes you do not need a metronome, but oftentimes people struggle with how to actually use a metronome, and so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. In order to do that, what we need to do is understand some real basic fundamental theory in terms of note quality or note duration. So we have what we refer to as whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes. And what we really want to focus on are the quarter notes and the eighth notes. But let's just go through how this works. So if I was doing whole notes, what I would do is I would play something and hold it for 4 beats. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or a note. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I was doing half notes, it would be half of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? If I was doing quarter notes, it'd be half of that. Okay? So what I want you to notice is every time we move up in this food chain, so to speak, we just go twice as fast as the last thing. So a whole note got 4 beats. A half note only gets 2 beats. A quarter note only gets 1 beat. So you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. An eighth note would get half of that. Okay, so now you're going to be doing 2 for every beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Those are eighth notes. Now, for a guitar player, what's crucial to understand is when you get to the eighth notes, you're either going to continue strumming them down like I just showed you, or you might make the transition to start doing down ups because we have ups available when we play as well, which you may know, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So I could do that exact same thing, but go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And what that enables me to do is to go a lot faster, being able to utilize downs and ups. We call that alternate picking. Okay, so then we move to 16th notes would be twice as fast as that. So 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4. And you're going to find out when we get to 16th notes, it becomes a lot harder to go 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and do them all down. That's where down ups or alternate picking, or alternate strumming in this case, becomes crucial. So as we speed up, as we continue to make our beat faster, at some point we're going to have to try and make the transition to doing down ups as opposed to just downs. Now this is a problem for people oftentimes when they're trying to practice is when to make that transition. And it kind of depends on 2 things. Number 1, what feels comfortable to you. And number 2, what gives you the sound that you want? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes when we play, we like that down. That down sound as opposed to. It sounds more aggressive when we're doing those downs, okay? But even if we want that, at some point, we're not going to be able to do those downs anymore. If I started playing. Okay, there's no way I could do that as down picking. There's no way anybody on the planet could do that as down picking because it's just humanly too fast. So please understand that that's what we're dealing with. I don't care about really the terms whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, although we do need to understand that, okay? But most importantly, I want you to understand that every time what you're doing is you're just elevating to a speed that's twice as fast as the last speed. So let's talk about speed for a second. The other thing that we're always battling when we're playing songs or exercises or whatever it is that we're doing is tempo, which is the speed at which the song is moving, okay? Now, for you and I right now, what we need to learn how to do is utilize what we call a metronome. And all I did was I went out to Google and I typed in the word metronome. And when you do that, you get a metronome right on your web browser. So you can go out and buy a metronome if you want to. You can get one for, an app for your phone or whatever it is that you'd like to do. It's perfectly fine. For our purposes right now, I literally just went out and typed in metronome and it didn't cost me a penny. So it pops up at 100 beats per minute. Now, what does that mean? It means that it's going to click 100 times in a minute, 100 beats per minute, okay? Now, it's a great place to start. You're going to have to figure out what tempo, what speed, what tempo is best for you for whatever it is that you're working on. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here, but it's very important to think about that. So let me play this for you. So the first thing for me to make sure, I got to make sure everything's running. The first thing for me is to make sure that I can feel that beat before I ever try and play along with anything. A song, a jam, anything. I want to know what the beat is. I want to know what the groove is. So as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking about that. Now for me, oftentimes what I do is depending on the beat, depending on the tempo of that beat, okay, I often in my brain will start thinking, here's what we have. It's about where we are. I'll start thinking, I'm subdividing in my head because it makes it easier for me to feel. And think of it this way. If I was playing a beat that was going bump, 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 it's so slow that it's hard to tell where each one is. But if I take that and I start thinking bump, 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 and start subdividing in my head, all of a sudden I can start feeling that. I might even think bump, bump, and now all of a sudden it doesn't feel like, a beat out on its own island, right? Where it's so slow you can't feel those. So I'm not saying that you have to do that. What I'm saying is that's what works for me. So as I'm listening to this metronome, whoop, there we go. That feels comfortable to me, okay? So if we think about that a little bit, let's keep going. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize that and decide what it is. Now we're going to get into the techniques. Those come next. We're going to start breaking down the core bucket, the technique fundamentals bucket, okay? But I'm just showing you how to use the metronome here. So as I'm listening to this metronome at 100, let's say I was working on strumming, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm just practicing down strumming. And what I'm trying to do essentially is two things. I'm trying to line up to the metronome, and more importantly, I'm trying to feel the beat. I'm trying to get my body, my arm, my strum, my pick, everything to be synchronized to the beat of that metronome to the point where I don't even really hear the metronome anymore. I'm locked in and I can feel it as I play. That's what I'm looking for. Now, let's say I was doing something, maybe I'm still strumming, but I'm trying to do, we'll call those quarter notes, right? Because I'm playing on each one of those beats. Those would be quarter notes. So let's say I started trying to do eighth notes, which is going to be 2 for each one, which is what I was thinking in my brain, right? So now what I start doing is either this, or you see? Now, again, the most important thing about this is understand that you might not be going 100 beats per minute. You might be going 80 beats per minute. Okay? You might be going 60 beats per minute. You might be going 130 beats per minute. It all depends on what it is that you are trying to do. What I always tell people is the first thing to try and do is play along with the metronome itself, with the quarter note that you are hearing. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, try and start there. Don't do doubles like I'm just doing right now. Don't confuse yourself. Just start with trying to do just whatever it is you're trying to do on that beat. If it works, but it feels too slow, just playing these. Whatever it is you're trying to do, if you're trying to use the metronome and you're trying to play on those clicks and it's too slow, guess what? You need to speed it up a little bit. You need to dial it in, okay? If you're trying to play on those clicks and it's too fast, then you're going to need to slow it down a little bit. Again, the most important thing, like I said at the beginning of this, is be honest. Don't try and be a hero. Be honest with yourself. That's how you're going to make headway with this whole thing. So if I decide that I'm playing on that beat and it's working great, okay, then what I can do is speed it up. Now, think mathematically here. If I keep trying to play on that beat, on those clicks, and I'm at 100, and I go up to 120, and it's still working, and I go up to 140, and it's still working. Now, I'm just being hypothetical here so you understand. I go up to 180, and it's still working. I'm still able to play on those clicks. I go to 200, and I'm still playing on those clicks. Understand, I could go then back to 100 and play eighth notes. Play 2 per click. Does that make sense? If I start at 100 and I'm playing 1 per click and I get all the way up to 200 and I'm playing 1 per click, I could go back to 100 and then play 2 per click, and it'd be the same as being at 200 playing 1 per click. Okay? So, and that's what I want to do because I want to start feeling the second beat even though it's not clicking. Bum, 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 bum. Okay? Now, again, if I get to 180, but I can't get to 200, if I get to 180 and I can do 1 per click, that's the same as doing 90, 2 per click. You see what I'm saying? Use a little math in there. It's okay to just play along all the way up to 200. It's okay. But at some point, you want to start feeling things at more reasonable speeds. Because you're going to play at 100 or 120 or 130 or whatever it might be, and you will do eighth notes, which is 2 per click. Okay? That's why quarter note and eighth note are just so important. Now, a 16th note, if you think about it, is doing 100, doing 2 per click, right? All the way up to 200, doing 2 per click, and then going back to 100 and doing 4 per click. That's how the mathematics of this work. Now that's where, again, it depends on where you are in your journey. Maybe you're already there. Maybe you're already doing. That's 4 per click. Or whatever. Maybe you're going, right? I'm doing 4 per click. But that's my point is, if that's all confusing to you, you don't want to be doing that. It's going to be too much for you. Start by just doing 1 per click. Now, again, we're going to get into all of these exercises, but I want you to understand the metronome and the importance of that metronome. If you can do that, you could do 2 per click. You could try 2 per click. Now, if I try 2 per click and I can't do it, again, what I'd want to do is go back to 1 per click and start speeding that up and figure out where I am. Okay? So learning to feel the beat is really important. Okay? Learning not only to feel the beat, but be able to count to that beat and line up with the beat. Rhythm, groove, all of those kind of things are just as important as anything that you learn on this fretboard. Okay? Because if you're going to play with human beings at some point, even if you're going to jam to a song, you've got to line up to that song. You know, if I'm playing whatever the song is, every song has a rhythm to it, right? Everything has a... You see what I'm saying? So we have to learn how to feel those things. And as a guitar player, the difference is at some point, we've got to make that transition from quarter to eighth, from eighth to 16th. And for us, the tricky part is that we've got to learn where our twist point is, where we move from just doing downs to doing down ups. For one of two reasons, either because we like the sound of it, or because it's necessary for us to be able to move to the next level. Okay? So if that makes sense to you, if you need to watch this a few times, that's perfectly fine. But as we move on here, what I'm going to start doing is giving you some examples of things that you can practice for each one of these buckets. They're merely suggestions of ideas. that you're going to look at and go, that kind of pertains to me, only I need to do this, or I need to do it at this speed, or whatever it might be, because all I can do for you is give you the tools, and we've already built out what our buckets are, what goes inside those, guesstimations of how much time we might want to spend each day. And again, all of these things can be varied depending on what works best for you. Okay? But now what we're going to do is going to start digging in. And when we do that, I'm going to utilize the metronome and show you how I would use that metronome in my practice. And again, I'm not basing this off my practice, but how I would use it if I was teaching somebody chords or scales or finger exercises or whatever it might be, and how I would utilize that metronome. Now, the last thing I want to say before we move forward is I don't always use the metronome, right? If I'm trying to practice a particular technique that doesn't need the metronome, if I'm studying the fretboard, right, I don't need a metronome. If I'm trying to figure out the cage chording system on the guitar, right, I don't need a metronome for that, okay? If I'm practicing tremolo picking, trying to focus on how fast I can pick, as fast as I can possibly go, I don't need a metronome for that. But if I'm trying to play at a particular speed, then I might need a metronome, okay? So it all depends. I'm just saying get used to being able to use one, because for me, a metronome is very much like a drummer that you do not have to pay, okay? That's what it is, because the worst thing that you can do is get together with other human beings and not be able to feel the beat. Like if the drummer starts playing, right? And you're like, I don't know. You've got to feel that beat and go, how am I going to approach this situation? Am I playing downs? Am I playing down ups? Am I fast enough at A, B, or C, whatever these things are? That's, again, this goes back to the first thing I told you when we started this course, is being intuitive, knowing what you can and cannot do, and then working on the things to keep making what you can do better and what you can't do on the table. Start making those things exist on the table, keeping everything in a nice chronological order, something that's a logical connection, logical path, right? All of these things are very important for you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with some ideas.